to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
The Urban Fae Trekking through Mundania, Part 3. We made it only a short way before our scouts stopped abruptly and the entire party came to a halt, each falling into his, her, or its, sometimes it just isn't clear with Fae, positions to secure our perimeter. The area was heavily wooded, so that left the chariot team, the fawns, and me exposed on the roadway. The rest of our little mob concealed themselves on the verges. Howls arose all around us. I understood them. I spoke to reassure the group. The howls are a greeting. Stay alert until we know for sure. Then stay alert anyway to preserve our lives. A familiar voice spoke from behind my right shoulder. Good advice, chieftain. I would expect no less from one promoted so young. It was my king. I stepped down from the platform and gave my nod bow of courtesy. My king, we had not thought to see you so soon. We bring grave news from the portal. The guardians are slain. We found some evidence that the Coyote clan was involved, and perhaps some fawns. We left our own sentinels in place until we met with either you or the relief. He stared. I am aware. A survivor of a band that entered the portal ahead of the Coyote clan warriors. Arrived a short time past. The attack was meant for the three of that party. You are familiar with the trio? I will continue with my response team, and when we have completed our work, we will return to the den with the remainder of your guardians. You will want to hurry. The survivor will not survive much longer. I've already sent for the Mactirmor. You will both be there by the time I return. With that, he swirled and faded, and the howls that greeted us sounded from back along the way we'd come. We picked up the pace, and on arrival, I sent the troops for rest and refreshment, along with any medical attention the wounded might need. I proceeded straight to the infirmary and saw a pitiful sight. A small, pink-furred, wizened form wrapped in bloodied bandages. There were bottles, vials, and flasks all around the bed, and the two anthros dressed as medics who stood beside the wizened figure of Machka, who lay limply on the bed. Her features cast a lighter shade of gray than usual. However, she managed to rouse a little when I reached her bedside. She regarded me for a long moment. I wasn't sure she'd be able to speak. Then she smiled. It was a small, weak thing, but for the first time she looked on me with at least a modicum of approval. Young wolf, you look so much like your father and grandfather. I hope my Lord Wolf will arrive before I pass from this life. She paused, her eyes closed, and for a moment I thought she may have lost consciousness from the effort of speaking. The eyes fluttered open once more, bright and glittering. I feared that you might not be worthy of the honors your grandsire showered on you. But he proved right. You earned the love of a great lady of the Fae. I still believe that you will bring woe and misery. You bring change that will always include pain and turmoil. The two wolves, whom you've met as watchdogs, gave their lives to fend off the Coyote warriors and the beast that accompanied them. I was sorry. They were good friends. Be careful of the Coyote clan, Koirab. They are ever changeable, and many find humor in the suffering of others. It is simply their way. She paused to wheeze a few breaths. I will see your parents soon, folk whom I love greatly. Do you have a message for them? That took me aback. I had no idea whether there was an afterlife. Clearly, Makcha believed it. I finally nodded. Just that I love them and miss them, and I hope that I make them proud. She made a sour face, and the liquids gurgled in her throat. For that you had to pause, to waste precious moments of the little time I have left, thinking what to say. I stared in horror, and she repeated the gurgling noises. I realized it was laughter. Tell your grandsire the same for me. Keep your teeth and claws handy, and don't forget the items you hold from your parents. Kill somebody in my honor. Maybe a close servant of our enemy. I leaned closer. Save your strength. Grandfather will arrive at any moment, I'm sure. If she heard, she took the message with her as her spirit left her old, pain-racked form. I smiled. A cat right up to the end. I'll have to go see Tom about some way to honor this lady. The Mactir Moor indeed arrived shortly afterwards. I greeted him, my expression neutral. Makcha, he nodded in his grim fashion. She said that she loves you, she will miss you, and she hopes that her actions in her life reflected honorably on you as her master. She would say something like that, he said a little hoarsely. He was very fond of his major domo and old friend. She used a sarcastic tone, but still mean what she said. Maybe. Up to this moment, I never knew when she was mocking or far too serious. Always the cat, that one. He smiled warmly in remembrance, then looked at me gravely once more. You were away longer than expected. This attack is not the only one. We faced down a few probes with smaller forces. When the king returns, we shall tell our tale. We had a time to get refreshed and take seats before his alphaness arrives. While we ate, I asked him. Makcha said something about a beast that accompanied the coyote warriors. We found no sign or scent of any other creatures. The beast that accompanies them remains in Mundania, and is likely returned to Otherworld by another way. It had been part of the raids on our territory, leading a band of other beings, to include a band of fawn archers, led by their satyr, a pair of minotaurs and a small pride of its own Minolians, the lion-headed men you saw at your great-grandparents' court. Does this give you any notion about who may have arranged the attacks? I nodded grimly. My false grandfather, Croesus. He may have chosen to side with Serpente as a volunteer. A bold move for him, from what I've heard. The big bad wolf shrugged. Maybe, though it's not like he was directly involved in any fighting. He simply did the work of transporting his minions and castings, glamours, glooms, and other means of stealth and rapid attack. He is, unfortunately, talented in those means. I may need to kill him one day, unless you get the chance first. On the way in, some of your troops informed me that you faced down Serpente himself. I wish I'd witnessed that. It was my turn to shrug. He had to flee. His servants were all dead, and none of my folk were, though a few were critically injured. We were too strong a force, even with his Kelpie mount. I may have seen a shadow of doubt cross his features, but my mind was still rolling. He was on a Kelpie? The big man growled. Unusual for one of them to allow such a thing, especially near fire rather than water. There was water on the other side of the portal. I thought people rode the things all the time. Don't they invite riders? I was nervous and wanted to talk. I missed Sorsha, and I wanted the entire business over so I could concentrate on her. I clenched the stone around my heart closely. He leaned back in his chair. Kelpies allow riders so that they can torture, murder, and eat them at their leisure. Occasionally, they allow them to be used as war mounts, but it's an odd combination. A fire-related being with a water-oriented creature in lieu of a horse or other mount. Serpente is powerful, though. He trailed off into obvious thought, his fingers steepled under his chin and his head lowered. An eeky swirl alerted us that the king, the alpha of the Gaelic Western Wolf clan, had returned. He'd returned to his anthro form. I don't think he really had a preference. He seemed comfortable in either skin. "I hear that the battle joy saved you once again, young chieftain. I wonder what your enemy thought of that." Grandfather and I bowed to our mutual liege, and I responded, "Yes, my king. Though it was only a skirmish, I would have engaged with Serpente himself, but our numbers dissuaded him. His mount seemed eager enough and unharmed by the arrows and javelins of our forces. I hoped that he would give me some clue as to how to defeat the Kelpie." He regarded me for a moment with his inscrutable wolf eyes. "Kelpies are difficult foes. Only special weapons can harm them, and even then, they are hard to actually slay. This one is serving Serpente for some reason. I understand he likes to refer to it as his Kelpie. Not where the creature can hear him, of course. That might cause it to slip into a rage, similar to the one you employ, but turned against the rider." If this conversation had occurred in Mundania, I'd expect his statement to end with, "just saying." I bowed once more to acknowledge that he had anticipated my true question and answered it clearly. "I have not yet discussed with the Mactir Moor, but if I understand correctly, we may ask one more boon of you? If so," I glanced at my grandfather out of deference, "I believe I may have a plan that will end the feud, or at least shorten it considerably." I was greeted with thoughtful silence. Then Grandfather nodded his assent. The Alpha King gape-grinned, like the true wolf he was. I wanted to see Sorsha before we undertook our next great endeavor. It turned out that she and her guardians had taken up residence, along with several other of her clan, in the waters in our realm. The Mactir Moor accompanied me, and I got to check in briefly with Gurar. He appeared to be doing well, and both he and Gairn had their teams appeared happy to be rolling once again. I wasn't sure why I rated the company, but I was glad of it. Grandfather and I hadn't simply visited in a while. I missed that, and I realized I'd missed his advice of late. Perhaps he felt the same way about providing it. "Do you favor the sea, Rob?" I thought about it. "I'm not sure, sir. I've been around much countryside for most of my life. I've loved everything on this side. I think I favor the wooded hills the most. Near the mountains, but not necessarily in them." He grinned, "As do I. However, there are places where the forest runs all the way down to the beach. Yet the ground rises swiftly into crags and peaks, just right for building a dune." I realized he was building to something, and I suspected what it was. "So, as a chieftain of yours, would I rate such a province?" "Naturally. You need only gather your folk and erect it. You have sufficient followers, and after the feud, I believe even more will flock to your banner." He glanced sidelong and slyly. "Something else which you have to attend. You cannot use mine, at least not the long term. Those who serve will want to see their own master sigil." His banner sported a gray wolf face with a bloody maw, with a bright blue background and a field of 6 stars. "The place where we will meet Lady Sorsha and her party is the very shore I mentioned. We can discuss details later, but you may as well take a look. One of my favorite aspects of the nature of Otherworld is that the land is malleable and extended wherever we need more space or a change in shape. It wasn't exactly a constant shifting, just occasional brush strokes, like an artist, painting final touches that were never quite final. It could extend into multiple worlds or have abrupt portal entries. It was a wonderful place to be part of, despite the dangers and sometimes confusing laws with their gaping loopholes. Or maybe it was wondrous because it could be so easily disrupted by its own nature and the whims of its inhabitants. The day was clear and brisk and as beautiful as I'd seen anywhere. Glints of sunlight played on the waves, and the birds, both land and sea varieties, wheeled and mingled overhead, singing and crying aloud to friends and foe alike, greeting or warning as needed, and reveling in life. Several dark shapes emerged from the water and hump-walked their way up onto the dark sand near a group of stones. The rocks were set just right for sitting and visiting in a small group. I really love so many aspects of Otherworld. Sorsha flattened herself on a stony pedestal and bobbed in greeting. The others, some in seal form, and others shifted to anthros, arranged themselves and gave greetings as well, mostly to the big bad wolf whose realm this was. "Hello, my love." I was startled to hear Sorsha's voice admit from behind the whiskers of her pinept smile. It was an odd manner that the beings in Underworld used to speak without using their physical mouths. I'd discovered that on this side. Tom could speak that way. It was only in Mundania that he required special days to verbally express himself. Yet another thing to love. I choked back the stupid response, "Duh, you can speak," and instead managed to reply decently, "Good morning, my Sorsha. It is good to see you and hear your sweet voice." She barked a little laugh. "I recall how disconcerted you were when hearing others speak in this fashion. I'm learning the skills of my mother's clan." Her tone grew wistful. "It's what I have from here forward." I gave her my best reassuring, "It'll all work out" smile. "You're still gorgeous to me. Those eyes." Ahem. When the big bad wolf growled, all others tended to fall silent. Love-addled or not, my mind snapped to attention, and my jaws stopped moving. "We have matters to discuss. These warriors and others wish to join our feud. We are at the end of the term for when the volunteers may do so. These are the officers for the last contingents of our army." I bowed to the group in general. "You are all most welcome, sea wolves." I don't know why I said it, but it worked. With one term, I'd bonded them to us. We would count them as clan brethren. I'd honored them, yet recalled their own claim to glory. Besides, it sounded pretty cool. It was a great day. So foobar and snafus. Mama Jinx arrived to ruin it. Apparently the Murphy was off plaguing some other unfortunate. Hopefully our enemies. Foolish cub. You play at war and fighting and hide in the fear that brings on the state that you so coyly call the rage, the battle joy. Ha! It is not but panic spread from the terror that resides so constantly in your coward's heart. I knew that cold, ringing voice. Only the Lys Erg could deliver that otherwise pedestrian insult in such an aggravated tone. It towered above us on the rocks that climbed the shore and littered the ascending slopes. "You could not even save your lady. She is the brave one. Undoubtedly, she would have preferred a being who was capable and worthy. Now she is stuck in the form of a pitiable creature that reeks of sea and fish, gambling clumsily about on land like an awkward beast she has become." He clearly understood my weak spots. The love I felt for Sorsha and the pain and conflict I felt over what our future would hold. He knew that I was quick to anger and perhaps assumed that I had not learned that he was invincible or hoped I would forget. In fact, I had learned a few things. What being set you to purpose, foul cretin? He was obliged to answer, yet he did not have to do so directly. The being is called of the same color of liquid as what I shall rain down upon your fresh corpse as I revel in your dishonor, rang the voice. Great, I thought. Fate grandfather truly wanted me dead and knew he couldn't manage it on his own. I wondered whether this was a new assignment for the Lis Erg, or a follow-up visit from its previous failure. In any case, I was angry and fed up with people trying to kill me. I'd only asked who had sent him to determine whether I had a new enemy. I didn't, only a background nuisance who'd chosen a deathly path for me. Then he turned his cold gaze toward Sorsha. Since you are a coward, perhaps I might find fight with this ward of Proteus. Even her flippers pose more of a threat than anything you possess. That did it. He had threatened the mortal incarnation of my love. My short sword and claw were in my hand before another synapse could fire. I stepped forward and growled, "Fight me then and find out what I am." Not my best line, but he was already prepared, and while I moved faster than I could have imagined possible, I wasn't as swift as the Maktir Mor. He surged forward, his spear and shield in hand. He'd anticipated what I would do and had determined to save me from my folly at the cost of his own life. His blade sank into the flank of the large being and caused it to emit a grunt, yet it quickly responded with its axe. The handle extended and struck my grandfather's shield. I stepped forward and thought to take advantage of the assassin before he could recover, but he was too quick. It was all I could do to fend off his sudden, twisted blade that sliced towards me and slammed me backwards. He turned and engaged the big bad wolf in a way that kept me from joining. Their moves were too fleet and sudden to follow. The blows either thumped or scratched each other of them, and soon I had several cuts. I circled and looked desperately for an opening. Sorsha barked loudly over and over. My vision had begun to shade towards red when the word she was trying to convey finally registered. I forced myself to pause and then to dig quickly in my pouch. I found the hook and line and cast the hook towards the waves. It didn't go far, but I was more concerned with the immediate threat to Tyree's life. It was well that I focused when I did. Grandfather was on his back, his shield rent and broken, along with perhaps his arm. He'd discarded his splintered spear and held up his sword defensively. I stepped forward and caught the Lis Erg's axe on my own crossed blades and followed up with a kick towards its ankle. The kick landed but did nothing. With a surge, he threw me onto my back, landing on poor Grandpa's wounded form. He'd been much more successful in his fight than I in my puny assault. Now I'd gotten us both killed. Then Fortuna's frown turned upside down. A shadowy form slid from the water, just off the rocky shore, and the gnashing teeth of an oversized eel snapped shut on our opponent. With a quick gape and gulp, the meal was finished, and the enormous, slimy form slithered back into deeper water, with the Lis Erg sliding from its maw towards its gut. Sorsha and the others stared at me. The Maktir Mor raised a questioning eyebrow. "The hook," I informed him. I had no idea it would work on such a being. Sorsha thought of it. He looked thoughtful for a moment, then winced, then returned to what was on his mind. A pair of Selkie medics approached and began to address his wounds while he spoke. It was common for the true Fae to ignore the ministrations of others at times, though they were furniture. It was more a matter of focus than discourtesy. But to someone like me, raised in Mundania, it seemed rude. The servant class had vanished from the mortal world. Medics were not servants in Otherworld, per se. Yet they were performing their duties, as expected. There was no need for more than gratitude for their efficiency. Once he was able to catch my eye, he gritted through the pain. It was a desperate move. I would have never thought of it. Your lady still has her sharp mind. With that judgment, he inclined his head in a respectful nod bow towards Sorsha, who beamed in pride. Seals looked pretty happy most of the time, so when she beamed, it was truly a delight. There may be consequences for us, Rob, he continued. When I stepped forward, I wanted to deliver the forced blow so that the challenge would transfer to me. You attacked anyway. It didn't say anything, no warning of a violation of law. I've always known it as a creature of duels. It does not typically face multiple opponents. I've never heard of anyone enlisting a third party to defeat it. In fact, to my knowledge, it has never been defeated. I wonder which of your parents had that hook and where they got it. Sorsha had calmed enough to use her newly acquired speaking skills. It is a gift of Proteus, to the Seal clan. No one alive can tell us more. It works 3 times, and then must be bestowed on another. One of my parents must have given it to one of yours, Rob. The senior Selkie grinned. It may have been given for pure friendship and bravery of your parents. Their tale of dragon slaying is legendary. He shrugged. Or maybe it was part of the hoard of an old Varmstorm. Never know what dragons may find worth keeping. His home was hard by the sea, and our quarrels with him included the loss of many lives and treasures. I nodded and carefully rewound the line and replaced the hook in my pouch. Apparently, it didn't actually snag the water creature. It simply called them. I had long ago ceased wondering when it came to Fae Tech. So, do you think the Lice Erg is dead? Tyree shrugged and then wrinkled his nose with the jolt of pain it clearly caused in his forearm. I don't think it dies so easily. More likely your fishy savior is lying on the floor of the ocean, gutted and feeding scavengers. My question is whether it finished the fight. If not, then the Lice Erg can return and attack without warning. No need to wait for us to initiate the conflict. The pending question of law is the only reason I can think of that it has not returned to complete its task. The other part is, if it is defeated, then it is required to kill the being who engaged its services. That has never happened to my kin, at least in no more than legends. This is Otherworlds. Perhaps the legends are more than just stories. The law would not exist if there's no way to defeat the thing. He caught the eyes of the medics. Gratitude for the fine job. I think I may heal and be able to fight again another day. He looked at his ruined target. I will, however, need a new shield. We had to bid farewell to Sorsha sooner than I would have liked, especially now that we could communicate more clearly. However, we had a feud to finish, and time was not on our side. She was understanding as always, and we shared one last wave before her sweet head disappeared beneath the waves. I finally had to ask my grandfather a nagging question. My Lord Wolf, you fought the Liz Eric for around a full clock minute before he got you down. That's a long fight when edges and points are involved. I thought I was pretty skilled, but I know I'm strong for my age, yet he bounced me around like a kitten. Is he just that good, or are my skills more lacking than I realized? Both, he growled. And we rolled on towards home. So quoth this raven, have a lovely weekend, my darlings. Thank you so kindly for stopping by my chateau, my darlings. It does mean so much to me. Please, if you have not subscribed, as many of you have not, please do so. Give me a like so I know what you would like to hear. And comment. I always love to read your comments. And special thanks to my Patreon and membership supporters. Ciao, darlings.